You're instantly going to get increased energy, libido, confidence. Pumps are going to be crazy. Some people are more prone, more sensitive to these sides. The whole point of taking a blast is to have. What's good, guys? Diagofit here, diagofit.com for coaching. Today we're going over what you can really expect from a 500 milligrams a week test blast. This is like the bread and butter when it comes to steroid cycles, gear cycles, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Everyone always tells you in the forums on fucking YouTube, if you look up the best beginner friendly blast, they're going to be like, just take 500 mgs a test, bro. If you ask your fucking gym buddy, any random juiced out bro in the gym, they're going to say take 500 mgs a week a test. So we're going to go over what you can actually expect from the cycle. That was my first cycle in general, is 500 mgs a test. It's the majority of people's first blast. Okay, there are better routes to take when it comes to your first cycle, which we will break down in this video, but this is what you should expect if you're going to take this dose of test. Now to start off, what are we talking about with test, right? So you can either take test E, C, or P. When it comes to E, that's enanthate, C is cypionate, P is going to be prop. These are the most common esters. Now typically you won't take prop when you're starting out. It's going to be between E and C. So these are your normal half-life type esters. Okay, it's going to fully kick in within about 2 weeks. It will exit the system in about 2 weeks as well. So you can get away with twice a week pins. Even in some cases, once a week pinning. A lot of people will tell you that's fine. I wouldn't recommend doing this. It will cause peaks and troughs to your hormone values. So I wouldn't do once a week pinning. If anything, 2 is like the bare minimum when it comes to this shit. And 3 is going to be solid to ensure that you got stable hormone values. You don't want that compound peaking and troughing throughout your blast. You don't want to run into those peaks and troughs. The whole point of taking a blast is to have stable hormone values where you're in a perpetual super physiological state and it's consistent. It's not going up or down. When you're natural, okay, your test values will automatically be going up or down. This is why some days you might feel like shit. Some days you feel like a fucking god. That's what happens naturally. If you got a shit night of sleep, if you didn't sleep well, it's going to tank your fucking test. If you didn't eat the proper nutrients, if you didn't get a good set of meals in that specific day, it's going to tank your test. If you got a good amount of meals in, you ate some healthy food, you got a good night's sleep, okay, that's going to increase your test values if you're natural. But if you're on a blast, the whole point is to maintain stable hormone values. It does not go up or down. It just stays perpetually in that state for the blast. That's at least your goal and what you want to do. So when you're taking E or C, twice a week, 3 times a week pinning is preferred. If you're taking prop, this is a fast acting ester. It's in out of your system within 1 and 2 days, and it kicks in within 1 and 2 days. So you're going to have to pin a lot more frequently. It's very typical to see either daily or every other day pins with prop, which is why it's not beginner friendly. So you wouldn't want to take this for your first blast of 500 mgs a week test. You'd want to take E or C. So let's go based on the assumption that you're taking enanthate or CYP. So you're going to be pinning twice a week, 3 times a week. Now, what are you going to expect in terms of overall results? In that first couple weeks, you can easily see a 15-pound gain on the scale. So if you are 150 pounds, you look at the scale, it'll probably say like 160, 165, even 170. You can gain 20 pounds of fucking weight within 2 weeks when you first hop on test. That's very common. The majority of that is just water, extra water retention on your frame. You definitely can gain a little bit of muscle in that time frame, but you're not going to gain a shit ton of size right off the bat. It's generally going to be water weight that's on your frame. So that's very typical. That first couple weeks, you will definitely see a gain on the scale. Don't be surprised by this. It's very fucking common. Now, over a 12 to 16 week time frame for the blast, typically when you're new, you're going to take a 3-month blast or a 4-month blast, but I would definitely advise 12 week. You typically would want to take a 3-month cycle if you're brand new of 500 milligrams a week of test. So you can easily see 10 to 20 pounds of lean mass gain from the cycle if you are dialed with your diet and your training. If you're fucking off, you're slacking with those 2 variables, you should not expect to see crazy results. You might gain 3 pounds of mass, 5 pounds of mass with a shitty diet and training protocol, which is a waste of a cycle. You could easily do that naturally. So if you're dialed, 10 to 20 pounds of lean mass is absolutely common. This is common to gain this amount of size within 3 months or 4 months on the blast. Now, within that first couple weeks, strength is automatically going to increase significantly. You're going to feel that aggression. You're going to feel like you push a lot harder, a lot longer. Your weight is going to be pumping up on your lifts, whether it's dumbbells, your compound lifts, bench, squat, deadlift. Okay, it's going to increase, and it's going to be a significant increase, especially if you're new. You're going to be like, okay, I can push a lot more with ease now. This is how a lot of people get injured off the rip, because they start pumping their weight up too high. They get that strength increase. Now they get a shoulder injury, or they fuck something up their ligament because your tendons or your ligaments, they're not progressing at the same rate as that strength, as that your muscles is allowing you to push, right? So it causes a lot of injuries within this time span. You have to be wary of that. You have to understand that you are going to gain strength fast, and you need to allow the rest of your body to stabilize with the strength increase. You don't want to just push it way too hard off the bat, even if you're able to. So that's something you really have to keep in mind. But you're instantly going to get increased energy, libido, confidence, recovery. Pumps are going to be crazy. Pumps is absolutely something in that 1 to 2 week time period of taking your first dose. You'll for sure get crazy pumps. Like that's the one thing you're going to notice the quickest. But energy and confidence will of course go through the roof too. You will have that elevated fucking aura. You walk out in public, it's just a different type of energy that you're portraying yourself to be at. That's why a lot of my clients, they'll be like, yeah, dude, I walk into a room now within 1 to 2 months on the blast, and you just get increased respect because you're portraying yourself, you're putting yourself out there. You have a different energy about you, presenting yourself in a way better manner, and you're walking in confident, and it definitely creates opportunities as opposed to someone who didn't have this prior, had low testosterone to begin with, right? Now, weeks 4 to 8, you're definitely going to notice a lot more visible fullness. Vascularity is going to start kicking in, and gains will start to hit around that weeks 4 to 8 period within 1 to 2 months. That's when the gains are going to start to be noticeable because you're recovering a lot quicker. If you're dialed with your diet, you're able to intake that protein, your carbs, your fats, and you are growing. Hey, you're recovering. Protein synthesis is increasing, and you're putting muscle on your frame at a way quicker rate at this point. Assuming the fact that your training is also dialed, you're doing exactly what you have to do following your plan, then you're hitting those lifts, you're increasing your weight, and your body's naturally going to grow. So within 1 to 2 months, you will absolutely notice a lean mass gain. You're not necessarily going to notice this until you shred. If you're bulking, then when you're looking at the scale, you're not going to notice the lean mass. A lot of it, again, is water weight. But within that week 4 to 8 range is when you're going to start getting the lean mass accrual at a rapid rate. Now, weeks 9 plus, you are going to see continuous progress, but water retention may definitely mask your definition. So at that point, you're still going to be gaining size, of course. But if you're in a bulk, you're not concerned about definition and like that dense look. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to gain size. Unless you're trying to shred with the blast, which probably isn't the best idea if you're hopping on. You want to gain muscle with that first cycle. But just know that weeks 9 plus, the water bloat's probably going to completely mask your definition, and you're not really going to notice that dense, dry look, specifically on 500 mgs a week of test. You definitely can see faster fat loss as well within this time frame if you're in a deficit, like I mentioned. But if you're in a bulk, then you're going to get mass definition. Now, let's look at the sides, because this is something that you absolutely have to be aware of as well. When it comes to the main sides you'll see on 500 mgs a week of test, whether that's E or C, is going to be estrogen related sides, high aromatization. This is something that you of course have to be on top of. So you want to get your preset of labs done. Make sure that your estradiol, this is also known as your estrogen or E2. When you're looking at your blood work, it's going to be labeled as estradiol or E2 on your labs, depending on the lab you're going to. This always has to be in range. Now, the first blast, the reason why I always recommend people take a lower dose, whether it's 150, 200, 250 milligrams a week of test E or C, is because you want to know how your body's going to aromatize from that dose. If you're a high aromatizer, your estradiol is going to increase naturally at a lower dose. Okay. And if it does increase massively at a low dose, you know that you're a high aromatizer. If it doesn't move, that means that you're most likely not a high aromatizer, which means that you can bump up the dose, keep checking your labs, make sure your E2's in range without risk of the E2 related sides, which are water retention, bloating, gynecomastia risk, mood swings, high emotional states. These are all common estrogen related sides. The one that people are most concerned about is the gyno risk. That's the thing that really sucks. If you get it, there's no turning back. Like once you get the gland, you have to get it surgically removed. There are ways to reduce the gland down in terms of the puffiness, in terms of the protrusiveness of the nipple, but you're never going to get rid of the gland. You'll always have that little fucking bump under your nipple, and it's very noticeable when you're shredding. That's when it sucks, because it is going to be that like a very protrusive bump under your nipple that you don't want to have. And that is one of the main concerns with estradiol when it comes to your blast. So that beginning stage of the 500 mgs a week of test or lower, okay, which you should be doing, is to measure out how high you're going to aromatize, to make sure that you're taking your aromatase inhibitor dose properly. Now, aromatase inhibitor or an AI is used to reduce down that estrogen if it is elevating. So 90% of people will need this, but there are 10% of people that won't need an AI ever. They don't aromatize at all. It's uncommon. So the majority of people will need this, which is why you want to take a lower dose of test first to decide and see whether or not you are a high aromatizer. But this is one of those common sides that will arise when it comes to 500 mgs a week of test. You can almost guarantee that you're going to aromatize in some way or form with your estrogen when it comes to this high of a dose of test. So that is something that you have to be wary of. And this can start happening within within 2 weeks, right? When it kicks in, you'll start noticing it. If your nipples get sensitive, if they get puffy, if they get a little bit irritated, you know that you're probably aromatizing that shit. And you should be getting your labs done, specifically your hormone panel, every couple weeks to a month after that shit first kicks in after the 2 weeks. So you want to make sure you're getting that done very frequently to determine whether or not you're aromatizing or not. Now, also androgenic. Believe it or not, test is anabolic. It's also androgenic. If you are prone to this shit, you can run into acne, hair loss, male pattern baldness is something that's very typical. If you're prone to it, a lot of people aren't, but some are. So this is something you should be at least expect to notice. Let's say that your dad or your grandpa, okay, runs into balding. If you look at your dad, he has male pattern baldness, or your grandpa has gone fully bald, you can almost expect yourself to run into this as well. It's genetics. So there's a high probability you will also run into this. If they do have that and you hop on gear and you notice some male pattern baldness or acne or whatever, then you should know that you are probably genetically prone to androgenicity when it comes to these compounds. So that is something that you definitely can run into. Also increased body hair growth. Okay, when it comes to your chest, your back specifically, you definitely run into increased body hair growth. Also facial hair. If your facial hair starts to become more full, more pronounced, you can almost guarantee that you are going to react in a more sensitive fashion to androgenicity with gear in general. So that is something you have to keep in mind as well. Also cardiovascular sides. So elevated blood pressure, lipids, okay, you can get higher LDL, lower HDL, very common as well. A lot of people are genetically prone to this, some aren't, but you won't know unless you get your labs. You should start to expect this at weeks 3 to 4. If anything starts fucking up on your lipids, or if you have a blood pressure cuff, which you should have, if it gets worse, then you know you're prone and you know that you have to start deploying counteracting measures to get that down. And you should expect this moving forward with your enhancement journey. Now, those are some of the main things that you will begin to notice from 500 milligrams a week of test. It's not the end all be all. It's not trend. It's not halo. It's not insulin. You're not going to run into crazy ass sides off the bat, but some people are more prone, more sensitive to these sides than others. So you're not going to know unless you're on top of your labs, unless you're on top of everything that you're feeling, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically. And specifically when it comes to male pattern baldness, the worst part about this specific side is that you're not going to notice it until it's too late, which is why you have to be taking pics of yourself in the mirror. You have to be checking on those pics every week to ensure that you're not running into this. It's very difficult when you're looking at yourself in the mirror daily, when you're just waking up or going to bed, whatever, brushing your teeth. It's hard to notice. So by the time you actually run into massive male pattern baldness, it doesn't just happen in one night. This is something that gradually occurs over time, over many months, over years. And right when you notice it, when you're like, oh fuck, I'm running into male pattern baldness, my hair is thin, it's falling out, it's too late. When you've noticed it, it's too late and you've already fucked up and lost a shit ton of your hair. So that's one of the major cons with male pattern baldness. That's why it is good to have that third party looking over your check-in pictures, looking over your facial pictures, just to make sure that you're not running into this. And if you are prone, you have to have a protocol to mitigate this specific side effect. That's pretty much it when it comes to that first blast. 500 is definitely an overkill dose for your first cycle, but that is the most common first blast you'll see people take is 500 milligrams a week, test E or C. Now, if I were you, if I were new, I would start at a very low dose, 150, 200 milligrams a week of test, and then gradually increase from there. You don't have to start at 500 milligrams a week. The higher the dose you take, the more diminished returns you get, and also the more sides that you're going to run into, and long-term sides, short-term sides. So you want to start low, see how your body reacts. If you have to take a higher dose, then bump up the dose gradually. It doesn't hurt to start low and work your way up. However, it does hurt massively to start high and have to lower the dose. You don't want to start high and start having to decrease the dose because of sides. You want to start low, and if you're not running into the results or not obtaining the results that you want, then you start bumping up the dose gradually. Okay, that's the best point of attack you want to take with your blast. You don't want to start high and have to decrease. You want to start low and bump up the dose when need be. So that is my 2 cents when it comes to the 500 milligrams a week test cycle. One of the most common cycles that you'll take if you're new, but it's not recommended. Okay, I would start low, work your way up as I mentioned. But if you guys like this shit, like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys want me to make a vid on in the comments below, and I will make that shit. Whatever gets the most likes, I'll make a vid on that shit. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.